I'm Derek Kirkpatrick, and I've been trout fishing for 30 years. In these instructional videos, my friends and I demonstrate the techniques that we deploy to deceive trout. Let's explore old and new techniques while embracing all sides of fly fishing with no restrictions. I have guided and instructed fly anglers for over 15 years. Our hopes and intentions is to help you elevate your fly fishing game. This is Trout Tactics 360. Welcome to the second release in our Trout Tactics 360 video series. I'll be honest, this is probably the one we're least excited about. Why? Because there's already so much content out there on micro techniques. Some of it's excellent, some of it really misses the mark. Here on the Farmington, micro Euro makes up maybe 15% of our fishing throughout the year. If we were more focused purely on numbers instead of quality and size, that percentage would obviously be higher. When I think about anglers and professionals who really helped advance this style, I think of my friends Gordon Vanderpool and Josh Miller, both of whom have set the bar high with their approach and attention to detail. They've each coached the USA Youth Fly Fishing Team and continue to push the craft forward in meaningful ways. Also, Devin Olson brings unmatched technical depth, and Pat Weiss continues to refine the style at a very high level. This video isn't about reinventing micro Euro, it's about showing how we use it here on the Farmington when it matters most. Since the release of our first video on Trout Tactics 360 on YouTube, we had a lot of questions about our leader. We chose to do the leader at the end of the video. This time we're switching it up for this micro video. I'm going to show you two micro leaders that I use. The first is what I use for guiding clients. Okay, it's a high vis 0.008 thousandths of an inch leader material here. That breaks down to 0.20 millimeter. And then to the sighter, if this is 0.008 thousandths of an inch, the sighter is 0.007. I'm using Cortland tricolor, approximately, 18 inches. I like the black in the middle to separate the colors. That just helps with teaching. And I'm probably down to 6 or 7x tippet. Okay. This is really good for beginners that are starting out with micro. It handles a little better because when you're switching from handling fly line or maybe a thicker leader going down to this, at first it's going to be a little difficult. Don't worry, that's normal. You'll get used to it. The second is what I prefer really when going micro and trying to rack up numbers and catch good fish too, larger fish. But I'm using a 5.5x leader material, high vis, Paysan Michel. It's currently what I'm using. Who knows, maybe I'll change that. I like the way it telegraphs. I got pretty good feel to it. And I've put on a lot of this. Now, if you want to abide by comp standards, maybe you'll have a 12 or 13 foot section. But I don't worry much about that. So I have a lot on. And again, blood knot to 7x, and I got one fly, probably, I don't know, a 2.5 to 3, probably closer to 3 feet distance. You can fish this insanely short. All depends on the water type, what you're doing. If you're tight to your bugs, you can get extremely tight fishing this. But you can also slack drift, you can also drop the sighter on the water and give your flies freedom. So this is my go-to when fishing smaller nymphs, let's say in the 14 to 22 size range, where I'm fishing different water speeds, etc. You know, if it's more of a uniformal speed of current, I'll oftentimes fish 2 flies. I can present a little further away. But if I have complex currents, which we have right out in front of us, fishing that 1 fly with close contact, lethal, can really rack up the numbers. All right, we're gonna go over the micro Euro cast. This is the technique that I like to use. Other people have different techniques. Understand that during our release of longline Euro Nymphing on Trout Tactics 360 on YouTube, we were using a tapered system and we were casting like 35 feet for that technique, and we used a Belgian cast for that technique. However, micro is much different. Okay, there's some similarities. So A, wherever you throw the flies behind you is where they're gonna go in front of you. So if you throw the flies here and you try to throw them there, they're gonna go here. Pretend you have a bazooka on your shoulder, and where you're aiming, if you look behind you, that's where the flies need to go in order to get your flies to target. Okay? Now, how we get them there is I prefer a more parallel backstroke with a teeny bit of a lift, and then when I come forward, I have to make sure the flies have extended back. I come forward on a different path forward, higher than what I came back. So it's like a tight oval cast, okay? You can be very accurate with this cast. If you're having accuracy issues, it's because you're not getting the flies back to your 180 or your timing is incorrect, okay? So I have our leader system on here, the Paysan Michel, the 5.5X with 7X tippet. And I'm just gonna go through a basic cast using this technique, okay? We'll keep it tight here. You don't need a lot of line. Probably go with about that much. So first, let's start off with a water load. And this is good for beginners. I'm gonna throw it back to the 180. Okay, that means the flies are gonna go there. I'm gonna come to ready position. I'm gonna go slow, push, stop. Okay, again. 180, ready position, slow, push, stop. And I'm gonna catch the sighter in the air. That's key. So that I'm in contact with my flies right away. Now, without a water load. Back to the 180, pause, deploy, okay? It's the same thing. I'm getting the flies back there. I'm just not letting them hit the water. Back, wait, 180, catch the sighter in the air, in contact right away. That's the basic micro Euro cast that I teach. That foundation's important as we show you other casts throughout the video. If you're enjoying this video series and want to keep learning off the water, check out Trout Tactics 360 on Patreon. You'll find a growing library of video collections for every level of angler, from those just getting started to the ones fine-tuning advanced tactics. It's an easy way to stay connected, keep improving, and support what we're building here. Join the Nymph tier for just $5 a month and be a part of the Trout Tactics 360 community. Once you're comfortable making a basic micro cast, it's time to start working on your backhand cast. Which one you use, forehand or backhand, It really depends on what side of the river you're fishing from and whether you're right or left-handed. All of the casts we're covering in this video should be performed with both your forehand and your backhand. It's really important because if you only cast forehand, you'll sacrifice alignment, unless your flies are entering the water completely vertical. When we talk about vertical entry, meaning your sighter position is straight up and down, there's very little drag on your presentation. But when you're not fishing under your rod tip and your sighter angle starts to lean out of alignment, diagonal drag increases. And when that happens, you're going to hook up with fewer fish. Getting confidence with your backhand cast takes time and a lot of practice, but it's absolutely crucial. Just because you can place your flies exactly where you want them doesn't mean you're fishing efficiently. Fly placement is only half the equation. Your sighter needs to be at the optimal angle and alignment the instant your flies hit the water. That's what gives you full drift efficiency, 100% control from the very start of your drift. Here in the video, after a few small adjustments to my weight and flies, I finally had the right setup dialed in. Made a couple changes in weight, and I finally have the right amount of weight that I feel. Just a lot of reps. It's a nice wild fish. Not huge. A nice fish. Get him back in. After setting on this brown, I strip to engage the rod. I'm looking to get about 50% engagement right away, and I'm going to try to maintain that throughout the fight. As I mentioned back in Volume 1, Longline Euro Nymphing, we talked about getting to the reel, not forcing it. Here I'm waiting for the right moment, a safe time to make the transition. When I do get to the reel, I try to keep my eyes on the fish as much as possible. Is the reel an advantage? Absolutely. But have I seen clients and other anglers lose fish they shouldn't have because the first thing they do after the hook set is rush to the reel? Definitely. Nothing about fighting a fish is that mechanical. You have to react to what the fish is doing in real time. And you can't do that if your eyes leave the fish and drop down to your hands or the reel. If you need to glance down, make it quick, then get your eyes right back on the fish. Here, I have the fish in an ideal area to potentially get an early net. But this brown was not willing to let that happen. So here I'm applying low side pressure. That's an offensive move. I'm trying to get the fish above me to set up an early net shot. But with 6X, there's only so much pressure I can apply, and this fish clearly has other plans. This brown knew what it was doing, rolling, tail slapping. I start changing angles to stay safe and possibly keep from wrapping the fish up. You can see here I have a downstream angle. And once it was safe, I transition the rod back upstream. Of course, I'm always trying to go with an upstream angle when I can to encourage the fish to come upstream so I can apply more pressure and hopefully land it. I'm constantly paying attention to where the fish's head is facing and what I can get away with. At this point, the fish is more in control, so you'll see me occasionally go to a high rod position when it heads for skinny water. I drop the rod back down to apply a bit more offense, steering the fish where I want it to go, but also being mindful of not clipping any rocks in skinny water. Now I know it's moving towards the tail out, maybe even into the next run, so I start working to get below it. By applying upstream pressure and moving quickly, I'm trying to get in a position for a clean net before this fish extends the fight any further. After a longer battle with a trout, it's important to properly rehabilitate the fish before releasing it. Here I've chosen a protected area with steady flow, enough current to move water across its gills, but calm enough to keep the fish stable. I'm just cradling it gently in the current, letting oxygen circulate and giving it time to recover. Once it's revived, a quick photo, and he's off. Okay, back to casting. We talked about the micro basic Euro cast. With that cast, you know, we can enter and we can have a parallel angle of the sighter, a lower lead, right? Low lead, or we can come a little higher of an angle, right? Or a lot higher, more vertical, okay? But the next cast I'm gonna show you, and I don't have a really good name for it, is just a soft vertical entry cast. My friend Gordon Vanderpool, I know he uses a lot of similar casts that I use as well. He's probably got better names for this stuff. But all I'm gonna do, it's the same stroke, but I am gonna aim just a little higher, and then I'm gonna lift. And as the flies are coming down, you already want to be in tension with the flies. So when they hit the water, I have vertical tension. And as they drift, I'm going to drop with them in tension. The goal is to never be out of tension. Lift. And slowly drop. I got a pretty heavy bead on 2/8. Okay? That's it. That's a soft vertical entry. Let's talk about rod selection for micro Euro nymphing. This is an area where small differences make a big impact, especially when you're fishing 6x to 8x tippet with thinner gauge hooks. Because the tippet is so fine, Your hook set has to be softer than what you saw in our long line nymphing video. If you set the hook the same way you would with heavier tippet, you'll end up snapping off flies. That brings me to hook selection. For micro setups, I use thinner wire hooks, and in some cases, even dry fly hooks. They penetrate easier and they show less hook, which helps when presenting to picky trout. If your hooks are opening up, that's a clear indication that you're using too heavy of tippet for that hook gauge. Balance the wire strength with your tippet diameter. Now let's move into rods. For micro techniques, I'm typically using a 2 to 3 weight rod, but you can't just grab any 2 or 3 weight and expect it to perform. Design matters. Even with the best components, if the blank design and recovery speed aren't right, the rod won't fish well. A quality Euro rod has to walk a fine line. It needs enough power to set the hook quickly for penetration, but enough forgiveness to absorb the shock that can snap light tippet. If it fails at either, you'll bounce fish or break them off. That's what separates a purpose-built Euro rod from a soft, conventional trout rod. The recovery should be crisp and fast. That's the key to accuracy. And accuracy must come with the ability to cushion those light tippets under load. Recovery speed is critical for both accuracy and immediate line control, particularly when presenting small flies and tight seams. Feel can also be important. When I'm fishing directly under the rod tip for smaller fish with lightning fast eats, that extra bit of sensitivity, that feel, makes a big difference. At greater distances, much more of a visual detector, laser focused on the sighter. That brings us to solid tip technology. You'll probably see more multi-tip rods being designed in the years ahead. A solid tip rod replaces the hollow tubular tip section with a solid graphite insert. Here's what that means in practice. The advantages are significant for micro setups. A solid tip increases sensitivity. It transmits contact more directly down the blank, helping you detect those subtle fast takes. It also provides excellent tippet protection, softening sudden shocks and helping reduce the number of small fish you will lose after the hook set. For micro fishing with fine tippets, that combination of sensitivity and forgiveness can be a real game changer. So here's how I approach it. If you spend most of your time fishing light tippet and small flies chasing feel and finesse, a solid Euro rod is an excellent choice. If you're more focused on larger fish where power and control matter more than sensitivity, then stick with a hollow tip design. In the end, the goal is a rod that feels connected and balanced, responsive enough to drive the hook, yet forgiving enough to protect light tippet, so you can stay in full control from cast, hook set to net.
All right, back to casting. I got another one for you. This is pretty common. I feel like if anything, it's overused. It's a tuck cast. So this is a situation where I might want to plummet the flies quickly. Understand that you are sacrificing a little bit of drift. It may be a half a second. It may be a full second. But I'm going to over-energize the cast. I'm going to aim high, and I'm going to lift after the flies extend. What's going to happen is that over-energy is going to snap them down, and I'm going to get vertical, and they're going to come slamming down. Now you can alter the velocity of how hard they're coming down. So, you know, there's such thing as like a light tuck. That's more like a medium, you know, and then a heavy tuck, boom, right down in. The more velocity, the slower I feel like the recovery time. I've visually seen fish eat after making a tuck cast and it registering late on the sighter, if at all, if they grabbed it really quickly. So understand, my advice would be don't just cast one way. We can change flies In other words, in this soft water, I could fish at 2 mil. I could fish it with a 2.4 maybe. I'd probably hang up one. Then as we come out here, I could fish at 3 mil. And as we get in that real ripping stuff, fish something heavier. But without changing flies, there's certain things that I can do that's going to change how the flies are in the drift. They can get down quicker, they can get down slower, they can glide quicker, we can crawl them. That's all without changing a bead in some cases. I'm just changing an angle or how I'm fishing the bugs, the tension that I'm fishing with the bugs. We'll cover some of that as well.
So we're going to go over micro leader, and I'm going to go over how I use it, and then Andrew's going to go over how he uses it. He is comp standard. I am not. So oftentimes I have multiple leader systems on top of themselves inside my reel. So I have actually a sight nymphing leader that I was using back home. That's 8 pound. But today with the water type and the fishery that we're at, we're gonna fish micro. So I'm just gonna tie to my tippet ring that I had on the end of my 8 pound system. I've got 0.014 millimeter, which is roughly about 5.5x, and I'm gonna put on a lot of that. So why do I use a lot and forego the fly line? Well, mainly because I'm on a system that's a little, it's 350 CFS, like normal flow. So I'm micro fishing there when it tends to be a little lower, or if I'm fishing smaller areas where like the flow is more gentle, and I'm fishing kind of on the smaller side of bugs. And I put more on. Why? Because, well, I'm taking out students, and all kinds of stuff happens to the leader. So I can just cut back the leader and have a fresh section. Now, if I was going comp standard, I would have to replace the whole leader. But if I was fishing myself, I'd probably have to replace it a lot less, the sections. So I'm just putting this straight leader material on, and it's actually my sighter too. In certain conditions, if I need to, I can use, a marker to mark it up. But for me, for most scenarios, the visual aspect is great. So that's all I'm gonna put on. Some of the negative things about doing this are, you're gonna have fighting fish oftentimes with line in your hand. And you can burn yourself, you can cut yourself because it's so thin, it's hard to handle. I've just come to adapt to it, and it's okay for me. But yeah, those are kind of the pros and cons of the way I'm doing this. So we'll get Andrew's take.
Okay, so today we're out fishing some pocket water and fishing a micro system. Some 5.5 Paysan Michels, 0.014. I've got it tied. I've got a 14-foot piece tied to a micro loop that I whip finished on. I picked it up from Devin Olson on the Tactical Fly Fisher YouTube channel. So it's just very simple. fishing a Guideline LPX 10-foot 8 3-weight to a Poo semi-auto reel. Just helps me be very efficient, moving around in the water, picking up line, whatever I got to do. Yeah, very simple, just a level piece, no taper. It's not complicated. I like Payson because it's very bright, and I think it's really just sensitive, and just I love fishing it. So that's it. Yeah.
On this particular day, we had a really strong upstream wind. In my opinion, that's the toughest wind to deal with because it's constantly pushing you out of contact. We started out fishing a single fly around a 2.4 to a 2.8 millimeter tungsten bead, and we were grid fishing methodically and mechanical, trying to cover every inch. We rotated through a few generic confidence patterns, just changing how we presented them to the fish. Even fishing tight, the bite was slow. After about 15 to 20 minutes, we'd only brought a few fish to hand, which is unusual for this stream since it has a high trout density per square mile. The next course of action was to deploy some dry dropper techniques. This can bail you out in a lot of situations, but the fish just didn't want to eat the nymphs that way. So I decided to make a change. I lengthened my tippet and I switched to 2 flies. That allowed me to carry more weight and stabilize the drift better in the wind. Even though the natural instinct is to fish tighter when it's windy, I actually started fishing further away, not under the rod tip, and fished more upstream of my position, French style, which is key. With that extra weight in the rig, my sighter stayed stable, wasn't getting blown left or right. Everything stayed in alignment because of the additional weight distributed throughout the system. In an upstream wind, that's often my go-to adjustment. Once I had my technique dialed, I started identifying the specific water types where fish were feeding best. Mostly around rocks, push-throughs, and little funnel areas. That's where I found most of my hookups. Even though the nymphing stayed slow, I moved quicker, focused on those productive zones, and was able to rack up a decent number of fish, considering there was a light nymph bite. Later in the day, the dry fly bite really turned on, and switching over produced more consistent action. But when they weren't on top, or if they never got on top, and the nymphing was tough and continued to be tough, success came down to 3 things. Figuring out how to deal with the wind, choosing the right Euro Nymphing style, and targeting the water types where the fish were actively feeding. At the end of the day, we let the fish tell us how to fish. And that's what made the difference.
All right, back to casting. We talked about regular cast, micro. We talked about soft vertical entry. We talked about a tuck cast. I'm gonna break it up a little bit. We were mentioning how just by changing our cast and changing tension, that changes our drift. So I'm just going to show you a few examples of that. Using the different casts that we've gone over, I'm going to break this water type into 3 zones. 1, above us. 2, across from us. 3, downstream of us. Okay? I'm going to try things in each zone and try to let the fish give me positive feedback for how they want to eat the flies. So I'm not changing weight of the flies. If I was trying to catch fish in this run, absolutely I'd be changing flies and weight, etc. But we're just going over casting and tension. So first, I'm going to target this little push off. Notice the water's pushing away from me. Just going to do a regular cast. Low sighter angle, almost parallel.
So let's stop right here and talk about what we mean when we refer to different sighter angles. Right now I'm demonstrating a drift with a low sighter angle, almost parallel to the water. This angle is most often used in shallow to knee-deep water, but it can be applied in deeper water as well. With a low or parallel sighter angle, the flies sink more slowly because more tippet is exposed under the surface. More tippet in the water means more drag, and that drag causes your flies to glide a little quicker through the drift instead of hanging on bottom. Something also worth noting is the less vertical you are and the more angular you are, the more sighter alignment becomes really important, and we'll cover that later in the video.
Just going to do a regular cast. Low sighter angle, almost parallel. Flies are going to glide through the water with a lower chance of hanging up. Soft entry. Low angle, high tension. Draw, out. Same thing. Draw, out. Now, at the end of my drift, you'll notice I'm throwing the flies behind me because I'm only focusing in zone 1 really. If I was fishing 2 and 3, that changes to a waist cast, to that sweep back, to coming over on a different plane, okay? So depending where you take the flies out of, changes what I'm doing with the cast. So I'm gonna go to a higher angle. Now the flies might bottom out a little bit.
Okay, let's talk about a medium sighter angle. This is the angle most anglers naturally start with, and as they gain more experience, they begin to realize that different angles work better in different scenarios. A medium sighter angle is kind of the baseline. It's versatile, it's easy to manage, and it gives you a balance between control, sensitivity, and sink rate as you're learning to read the drift through the sighter.
So I'm gonna go to a higher angle. Now the flies might bottom out a little bit. High tension. Okay, didn't hang, but I had the sighter out quite a ways there. Higher angle, high tension. Okay? Didn't hang. Now we're gonna go to a soft vertical.
A vertical sighter angle can maximize the depth you can achieve with the weight you're fishing. When you're vertical at a given depth, far less tippet is exposed to drag in the water than that same depth on an angled path. Less tippet means less drag, which allows your flies to reach and hold their depth more efficiently. Another advantage is that alignment becomes far less critical. When your tippet enters the water vertically, there's no room for human error with diagonal drag. If you're truly vertical, the entire system is straight, clean, and efficient.
Now we're gonna go to a soft vertical, which not really what I do in here, but just to show you. Dropping with the flies as we go down. Okay, I'm in zone 2. So now I'm gonna throw waist cast, back, forward. I'm gonna do a vertical, soft vertical, boom. Wind's gonna push that all over the place, so I'm gonna back off. So with this ripple, it comes in shin deep, and then it drops pretty good to like knee deep, and then even hot, you know, even a little deeper back here. So the fish could be feeding in different ways. If there's a migrational drift, they might be eating the bugs high off, because when they roll off and they have that quick drop off, food's up high if it's a migrational drift. If there's no migrational drift, they might be lower, eating the bugs close to bottom, in which case, you know, that soft vertical as I get off and fall off the shelf, that might get me the eats, okay? I can also change tension, so we're gonna do that. We're gonna go to a soft vertical, contact right away, dropping with the flies. Okay, that's deep water. And that's a nice drift right there. See that? It's actually just getting ready to pull the fly out, not paying attention. So quality of drift, just by changing what you're doing, that can get you a lot of eats. What a soft take that was too, nice wild. Wasn't really expecting to catch anything here. We're just talking about casting. So that was a soft vertical. Now, we're gonna do something similar, but we're not gonna do the soft vertical. We're gonna do kind of a normal cast here. I'd say about a medium angle of the sighter. And then we're gonna drop tension as we come off the shelf here. So we to high tension and then slack drift. Complete slack. Okay, end of the drift, waist cast, back, forward, right? Drop slack, regain, tension. Okay, as we come off, tension, drop slack as it drops off, regain contact. Zone 2, elevate. Okay? Same thing. Drop tension, regain tension. Keeping tension through zone 2. Zone 3, I'm inverted and I'm going to pause the rod. The flies are going to lift naturally. I could dead drift through zone 3. I could create a lift through zone 3. I can invert in zone 2. Cast, let your flies fulcrum underneath, and go with the flies inverted. In which case I'm still looking for an eat on the sighter and I'm still feeling. But I'm actually going past inverted and drifting with it.
Now let's talk about inverted drifts. In this method, we typically start with a medium or even a vertical sighter angle on the cast. As the flies approach our position, we intentionally move the sighter into an inverted angle while still maintaining enough tension to detect a take. I also use an inverted entry cast when sight nymphing below my position. Keep in mind this presents a completely different look to the fish. They get a fly first drift rather than a tippet first drift, and that change can be a big deal in clear water or around selective trout. Tension also plays a major role here because even in an inverted setup, we still need just enough tension to read the take without overpowering the drift.
Cast, let your flies fulcrum underneath, and go with the flies inverted. In which case I'm still looking for an eat on the sighter and I'm still feeling. But I'm actually going past inverted and drifting with it. I find that that's good with active bugs, right? Pupas, stuff like that. Different approach, different speed can get you the eats. Again, fulcrum under, invert, drift with it. Okay? I believe there's a name for that too, outside of inverted, maybe Colorado drift or something like that. All right, so we talked about tension, different types of casts. There's also floating the cider, which, you know, in this slow water would be good. Basically, you're giving your flies absolute freedom. You can add wax, you know, to your leader to make it float, floating the cider. I don't like to lay my leader down on the Farmington in a lot of cases for larger fish, because I've seen them spook with ciders in the air. Now this is micro, so it's not as invasive, but essentially your tippet length's really going to matter. What you can do is you can fish really light bugs, 2 mil, and cast and let your leader hit the water and track it down visually, and your bugs have a lot of freedom. So again, going towards tension, there's all different things that we can do, and just by playing around you can get eats that you normally wouldn't get just by altering tension in your drift.
So here's an example of why casting and alignment are so important. Once heard George Daniel giving a presentation talking about 2 dry flies, one in faster water, one in slower water. And that's kind of what your nymphs can look like subsurface as well. So here again, on the left-hand side of the screen, we have a dry fly in faster water. On the right side, slower water. The fly on the right side, that's in the slower water, is actually preventing the fly on the left from getting a natural drift. Here, somewhat similar. Slightly better, but still not good. If you have proper cast and alignment, the flies will move more naturally in the water, as seen here with these 2 dry flies in the same current velocity.
Okay, we're going to go over what I call the draw. Other people probably name this differently, but all it is in this run here I've got some depth. I'm going to be pushing distance, windy out. But instead of just using my rod hand alone to handle lead, I'm going to use my left hand as well. If we're casting further, and it's all relative because it's micro, so I wouldn't really designate that as real far, but I'm going to help the flies along here. But once we get back here, I'm extended, and I'm not going to get a great hook set. So instead, what I'm going to do is what I call a draw. I'm going to cast everything. I'm going to pass in a stripping position, but I'm not going to clamp. I'm only going to hook. And then I'm going to hook with my thumb, and I'm going to draw away. And what that's going to do, it's going to give me a nice stabilization of the cider, and my right hand can just hold the angle. So I can fish really comfortably and be in a good position to set. So again, we're going to cast everything. I'm going to pass, hook, and start to draw. And I'm in a comfortable position to set the hook. And if I want a little more tension, I can just increase the draw slightly. Deliver, pass, hook, start my draw. Okay, so I'm going to wade out, and you're going to see me put this into effect into some of these lanes here. There's a lot of different currents going on here. So alignment is extremely important. With 2 flies, we want to have our dropper fly in front of our anchor, and then obviously our sighter or our leader directly in front of our dropper fly. And we get good alignment. And we're going to utilize drag versus fighting drag. Now, fighting drag with micro is not awful compared to like fishing a heavier leader, because there's more mass in the heavier leader. So if I throw diagonal, the leader is going to cut the wind, it's going to cut the currents, and I'm going to get a decent drift. But as you saw with the two dry flies on the surface and how they were pulling on each other when we were diagonal, if I can get alignment, my flies are not going to pull on each other, and my system's going to be in the same water velocity, and my flies should stay in touch. It's when they start to disconnect that we don't get as many eats or we don't see them. Strong downstream wind today. Water load. I'm going to give my flies some freedom on this drift. I'm pretty light.
So here's really not a good hook set. Potentially a bad habit, something I probably got to focus on, make sure I'm not doing this often, but that's bouncing fish on the hook set. You want to make sure when you set the hook that you're solid and you don't bounce the rod back.
Almost bounced him. Bit about bead color and the clarity of the water. We're in the fall here. It's early October, and for me, there's one major thing that I look for, and that's the clarity of the water. We get some drawdowns from some lakes, and it kind of chalks up the water quite a bit, and when it's real chalky, which is definitely different for this river. Most times we have like almost like a faint rust color to the water. And this chalkiness, it's completely different looking. And when that's thick, silver beads can work really well. However, high sun in silver, not my favorite thing. But outside of that in the fall, I'm looking at a lot of like nickel, some copper, a lot of muted stuff. So today I'm going to fish a nickel bead Paradigone. It's 2.4, and it's quite windy out today, so it's going to be difficult. My casts, if there's no wind, you might see casts that utilize just a little bit of energy to get the flies in there, especially if I want to be in contact right away. But if there's wind pushing, you're going to see my casting stroke is going to be much more aggressive, okay, to get the flies where they need to get to. We're going to be fishing some pocket water that ranges from shin deep to above knee deep, almost waist deep in some spots. So, you know, the gradient is really good for Euro Nymphing. And we're going to identify what water type the fish want to feed on which is important. Not only figuring out, you know, bead color, size of fly, type of drift, it's also where they're hanging out to feed. Now, if there's a good bite on, yeah, you're going to catch them everywhere. But you might find that they're hugging really close to rocks where there's push-throughs and seams and stuff like that. And that's what I've been noticing lately. The funnel points have been holding the bigger fish. So we're really going to try to key in on those areas. We're not going to catch fish all over the place. It's going to be in these micro areas. If we can identify the water type that they want to feed in, then obviously we're going to try to recreate those scenarios. So fly selection this time of year, I'm actually very generic, as generic as I'll be all year on this pressured system. I'll fish some basic Paradigones, one or two, that's it. Some basic Waltz. What I do tap into in the fall though is
outside of the normal realm of bead color, which we already talked about, I will fish some hot beads. These fish are getting revved up, you know, spawn is approaching, and it does something to them where, you know, these gaudy beads, it's either a big positive or a big negative. Now, if I'm trying to be supernatural, that's when I go to these mute beads we've been talking about, right? But in the fall, especially during like lower light periods, that's when I'll switch to kind of the gaudy stuff. But I've had some good bite windows of big fish doing that. So that's something to keep on your radar during, I guess, periods of time when these fish get very territorial, right? Their aggressiveness is heightened because they're starting to move around, they're starting to look for spawning partners and all that. So that's just a quick tip. Okay, so we're gonna begin our approach here. Now, if under normal conditions, like, you know, prime season, I would work this every inch of this, meaning I'm gonna put 3 casts down, different sighter angles, different tensions, whatever, and then I'm gonna cast a foot further, and I'm gonna repeat, and I'm gonna grid it out, and I'm gonna fish every inch of it. However, it's not that good right now. So I'm gonna move quickly. I've pulled out 3 patterns out of my box, aside from the one I have on now, that are naturals. A caddis pupa, which they're very hard to imitate. These are the distinctus in their pupal form, very hard to imitate. Do much better with the larva. And then I've got just a generic Paradigone, and then I've got a blue wing olive Paradigone. That's on a silver bead. It's a great fly. We'll see how they react to silver today. I'm guessing probably not too good, not too well. And I have my nickel bead on, which I did guide through here a few days ago, and we beat them up pretty good, so that might not bode well for us here. Come on, baby. Getting up, I have a little tip wrap here just from coming down. Now remember, with casting, you might see some aggressive casting because of the wind, and when I just have a 2-4 on, that may not bode well. We may have to switch. I'm gonna be fishing under the rod tip, but my style might change based off of what I'm seeing. If I'm not getting eats, I might go to a more French style and try two flies. A little tuck in there, it's a little deeper. There you go. Okay. So that's good. Hopefully that replicates. Small fish, so I'm not going to use the net. My hands are wet. There's that wind. Okay, so that was a tuck cast right behind this rock. Single fly. I'm going to do the same thing. Tuck it down. Wind's blowing. I'm just going to change my angle a little bit. Inside of this further rock. Hit bottom there. I'm going to go to a slightly lower sighter angle. Good, little seam behind this rock. I'm just gonna dump one down in, right on top, boom. Throwing that down hard. Trying to get my fly down fast. Whoop. That's more of a bullet cast than it is a tuck. Throwing it down aggressively. That looks good. Okay. Moving on. I have this little flat piece in the middle here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a slack drift, then I'm going to float the sighter on the next drift. So I get a little longer in here.
We go soft entry. Lower angle. It's not bad. Okay. I'm gonna float the cider here. Very slow in there. Good. Again. Good. I'm gonna float the cider right behind this rock. Good. Okay, current gets a little aggressive right here. And there's a little bit of a pocket behind this rock. Now, anytime you get a pocket behind a rock, I like to get vertical. I'm gonna do a soft vertical entry if the wind allows, and then I'll go harder. I always wanna start gentle and then get aggressive, okay? No bueno. Probably gonna have to get a little closer because of the W. Too much wind. Now, if I don't want to wait, I'm gonna go aggressive. A little bit. There we go. Soft vertical, drop with the flies. Nice drift. A little more aggressive now. Good. Aggressive. Shorten up a little bit. See how I'm on top of it? I'm on top of it because the bugs are getting pushed all over the place. And if there's any kind of diagonal, it's gonna create weird drag. But if you're straight up, it's a little better, right? You're getting the same, mostly the same current velocities pushing around. I tend to catch more fish in that type of situation, just getting vertical above the flies. There we go. There we go. All right. Okay. Satisfied with that. Little pocket right here, a little below my position. I'm gonna tuck it in hard. I wanna get down quick because it's below me. There we go. And out. That's nice. Good. All right, now pushing up. In this aggressive stuff, there's been a lot of size like 24s. And when you're dealing with 24s and smaller bugs, I don't find that they get in this real aggressive stuff. So I'll move through it quickly. I'll throw one in it, but I'm gonna focus on that slower side over there. Now I could switch to a heavier bug. If I thought this water was going to produce, I would absolutely switch to a heavier bug. However, I don't believe that's going to be the case. Perfect, perfect release there. Just tucking it. Tucking it, tucking it. By that edge. Tuck, vertical. Soft vertical entry. Soft vertical, contact, drop. Soft vertical close to the rocks. Drop with it. Good. Drop with it. Okay, now we're gonna focus on this piece. All right, so now we're gonna focus on this juicy little bit here. We have fast water, we got some push throughs up there, which will help put bugs in. But they should be, I don't necessarily think I'm gonna get a big one in here. I think we got a shot, maybe a few fish. It's fairly deep, so we'll start off a little higher in the column and then we'll work a little deeper. There we go. That looks good right there. Okay, I'm gonna go a little deeper now. Tuck that down a little harder. Ooh. Wait for that W. Okay. And watch with the cast. I'm gonna go light, I'm gonna go closer to the bank. But I'm gonna come to ready and it's gonna be very tight. From the side, push, stop. Excellent recovery when you do that. There we go. Nice brown trout. Now I do feel like I could get heavier. I am gonna make a fly change, but not yet. I'm gonna pick at the edges with this. Getting in tighter here. Strong wing guts. I just get down, get upstream a little bit, reading the bow and the sighter. Reset, wait for the W. Low entry because of the wind. Slack drift, slack drift. There we go. So I went through there a few times tight, and all I did, just give the flies a little more freedom. That's it. Good release. Throw another slack in there. Slack. Strong wind. Okay. Slack drift. Picking up too much drag there. Waiting on the wind. Gonna tuck them down a little more aggressive. Tuck. Tuck. Now I'm crawling my bugs. You can see I'm straight vertical. I'm bringing them through slower. Little animation here. Ooh, little something there. Okay, let's try the animation again. Up. Very little. Settle. Okay, now I'm going to go to a tension, drift, slack. Tension. Slack. Lift. Jig. Good. Do that again. Tension. Slack. Lift. Little jig. Good. I'm going to go up a little higher, fish this fly, and then I'm going to change it. A little more length. I'm going to float the sighter. There we go. So it was that flat piece right behind the rock. I just floated the sighter in there, gave him a little freedom. Good. Same thing, see if anybody else is home. Slack. Little tension drift through there. I'm going to tuck that. Crawl them. Each fish can be different. That's why I'm mixing my drifts up. I'm getting fish on different styles of drift. So come up a little further here. Now I floated the sighter through there. I'm just going to go to a regular powered, normal drift here. I would say normal. Okay, that's a good spot. Drop tension, lift. Do that again. Good spot, slack. Slow lift.
So, what I have in my hands, this is Umpqua Performex high-vis butt material. We've been really happy with this stuff, specifically this 4X diameter. Normally with a lot of the materials we've talked about, like Paysan Michel or the Pure Sempe or many others, you can't really source them well in the US. So this has kind of filled that gap. They don't, unfortunately at the moment, do anything lighter than the 4X, which to us is kind of more of your all-around micro system. It's not the true micro when we're talking like 5.5 or even 6X, because you can still fish up to 5X tippet with this. But for all-around use, it's really good stuff. It's extremely high vis, which is very important. It's very supple, it knots really well, and it's very durable, which I think is one of the bigger keys, because a lot of this micro material stuff, they get brittle and they break quickly over time, like literally within hours of use, I'll have to change them. This stuff lasts a lot longer, which is cool. So they have the green. We also are carrying the orange, if you want to mix in a different color. And then they also pair up with a cider. They do it in the same diameter. They do it in pink, black, and chartreuse, and a red, black, and green. Seems to pair really nice with it, knots well. Again, it's supple. It's extremely high vis and it's still really durable. So the cider is 15 bucks and the butt material is 20, and you get about, I think, 30 yards on this. Yeah, 30 yards for 20 bucks. So it's worth checking out.
So for a micro Euro system, some of the flies I would commonly use when I'm, targeting, numbers of fish would be a waltz worm or a sexy waltz worm. And I'll do those in different color. Most commonly I'll do like a natural color. I do my own blend for my hare's mask, but you don't have to. And you could use squirrel, like fox squirrel makes a great waltz worm. And I'll do some plain, and I'll vary the bead colors. Could be copper, could be silver, could be metallic pink. Those would probably be my 3 most used colors, but I'll also tie some with gold beads. And it's probably not a bad idea to have some with black beads too for fish that have seen too many metallic beads. And the sizes on those would typically range anywhere from 2 millimeter to 3.5. And when you're doing a micro leader system with light tippet, you're probably mostly going to be fishing lighter ones, 3 mils and lighter for the most part. I'll also do a sexy version. Typically I do that in the natural, but you could also do it in other colors like olive or brown. And I also do the plain waltz in olive and brown. But typically if I do the sexy, I would tie it with fluorescent orange thread, and I would rib it with a UV rib, and usually a copper bead, and similar bead sizes, and typically anywhere from say a 14 to a 20 would be typical. Another fly would be, you got to have something in black, and what's called a red ass or a culi roja would be another great one. It's a perdigone. That's black, usually with a silver bead. Could also be copper, and then usually have some red tinsel or some red glow bright at the butt end. That's a good one also. Similar size range, I'd say 14 to 20, probably 2 to 3.5 mil would be typical. France fly is another good, just all around generic, small to medium sized mayfly. I have tied them big in the past, but typically those are tied smaller, like 16s, 18s, 20s. And you could even go smaller. You could either use a D-rib if you want a really segmented body, or if you want to keep it really skinny, the micro tubing. I like the hairline both for the D-rib and the micro tubing. It's very stretchy, very compressible. The most common colors I would do in that would either be black with a black collar. I like to use UV black ice dub, but it could be plain, black dubbing, and a silver bead. And I also do them a lot in like a sort of a dark olive version. Typically for that, I'll use the olive brown, either the micro tubing or the small D-rib. Silver would be my most common bead on that, but I also do some with copper. And another fly I like, you gotta have some sort of hare's ear variation. I call it a hotspot hair in copper, and it's just a carrot-shaped body of hare's ear with mottled hen saddle for the tail, red wire rib. I played around with wire colors. A red wire seems to get you more strikes. And then I usually do a copper bead and then a number 8 amber glow bright for a hotspot collar behind a bead. It's sort of a, I would call it fluorescent peach looking one. I noticed years ago that the French team do a lot of hot spots in that color, or at least they used to. And then when I found that material, I instantly knew that was what they were using, and I've had very good luck with that fly any time of year, but especially in the spring and the fall. And again, I've typically tied that fly anywhere from a 12 to a 20 with probably 14s and 16s getting the lion's share. The bead size in that could range anywhere from a 2 mil all the way up to a 4, but most commonly I'm fishing at in a 2.5, 3, or maybe a 3.5 on the heavy end. And then a last fly to sort of round it out is you have to have some sort of pheasant tail or pheasant tail variation. So I would have some plain pheasant tails, and you could either just tie off with thread behind the bead, or you could do a dubbed collar of squirrel or hare's ear if you want. And I would also have some Frenchy style pheasant tail, which is nothing more than a pheasant tail with a hot spot, usually fluorescent orange or fire orange, but it could be a bunch of other colors. You could do fluorescent pink, shell pink, chartreuse, or other colors. You could do ice dub. You could do thread, you could do glow bright, any of those to make the hot spot. I probably am more apt to use thread or glow bright to do it, but I will do some with like ice stub type materials. But make sure you got some plain ones also, because they don't always want a hot spot. And that would be pretty much roughly 5 patterns that would cover an awful lot of bases for a microliter system.
Here's a quick tip geared towards beginners and setting up your fly box so you know what bead sizes are what. Taking a marker and just written down on a transparent fly box so that I know my top row is 2.0, the next row is 2.4, the next row is 2.8, 3.0, etc. Now, starting out, you may just want to carry like 2.5, 3, 3.5, and keep it simple. But as you become more advanced, having more bead sizes becomes important.
Let's take a moment to talk about quick descent flies versus slow descent flies and the pros and cons of each. Quick descent flies are usually tied a little thinner and sealed with resin. They cut through the water and reach depth fast. These are great when you need small flies to get down quickly, or when the current is pushing hard and you're struggling to reach the strike zone. But as helpful as fast sinking flies are, there are plenty of situations where you don't want your fly dropping like a brick. Unnatural descent rates can spook fish or shut down confident feeders, especially educated trout. The second fly shown here is a generic hot butt pheasant tail with a CDC collar. CDC is a unique material because it traps tiny air bubbles like an emerging insect, and it also slows the descent rate while adding subtle, suggestive movement. So instead of crashing to the bottom, it settles more naturally through the column. I carry both styles in my boxes at all times. Each one has a purpose, and knowing when to fish a fast sinker versus a slower, more natural drifter can make a huge difference in your success.
Before we wrap up, if you found value in this video, please like and follow our YouTube channel for more content. And if you want to take your skills even deeper, consider supporting us on Patreon through our Trout Tactics 360 Nymph tier. Just scan the QR code on your screen, and for just $5 a month, you'll get access to a rapidly growing library of Trout Tactics content. We hope this video helped you build a stronger foundation in micro-Euro techniques, and maybe even spark a deeper understanding of this style of fishing. Huge thanks to Andrew Haggerty, Tori Collins, Joey Takeman, and Andrew Flores for their support and influence. And a very special thanks to Gordon Vanderpool and Josh Miller for sharing this craft with so many anglers. We appreciate you all for watching, and hopefully we'll see you on the water.
Hold up this.
Hold up the nuggies.
Precious cargo.